Breece Hall's a litmus test guy. I think a lot of drafters look at him and they say, Breece Hall's never averaged fewer than 15 points per game. He can catch passes, and New York doesn't have anybody. He's got to be a value to me at the end of the third, early fourth. There's some who look at him and say, maybe this isn't Aaron Glenn's guy. Now you got Braylon Allen, who's steaming up. How are you handling this Jets backfield? Do you have interest in it?
First preseason game, Aaron Glenn could be trolling us, but that was ugly. That was a committee, and basically what he had told us.
What? Why are you shaking your head?
You're welcome.
Talking fantasy football fades, players we are passing on in drafts and draft strategy. Less than a month ago to the NFL season, Theo Greminger, Fantasy Football Daily on the Fantasy Points Podcast Network, joined today by Nelson Sousa of FTN, one of the best high-stakes players in the country, a guy that I split a couple of teams with every single year. Nelson, let's not waste time here. Let's talk about it. Christian McCaffrey. This has been an interesting click for a lot of managers. I've been lower on him in ADP than a lot of people here at Fantasy Points throughout the offseason. I've actually moved him up from like my initial May rankings. I did take him at 201 in an FFPC main event, but a lot of times we're seeing him going at like the 107, 108. He's very, very much entrenched inside of the middle of the first round. Where are you at on CMC where you have to use like a top 7 pick on him?
So for me, where I'm at with CMC is this. If I'm playing in a tournament style setting, I want exposure to CMC, because when I ask myself the question of like what players could break fantasy, what players could be like the top at their position, CMC is one of those guys. So if he stays healthy, he's most likely a top 3 running back, if not the best fantasy player this year. If he's healthy, his usage is tremendous, and just the talent alone, pass catching ability, that's a big piece. So for me, I'm not full fading him. I definitely want to have some exposure, because you fade a guy like that and he's like, RB1 in fantasy, like you're going to have a bad year if you've got 0 shares.
So Nelson, you're a high stakes, but also a volume player where you're drafting quite often. When you're seeing with CMC and your comments on CMC, does the injuries to guys like Jordan James and Isaac Guerendo behind CMC, where neither one of those guys has had like a clean offseason or like a really buzz-filled offseason, has that made you a little bit more confident with Christian McCaffrey, where even if San Francisco wanted to like not decrease his touches, but not go overboard with his weekly touches, they really might have to from a competition standpoint, just based on all the players around him in that backfield. Are you kind of on that as well?
No, Jordan James is just a draft pick. There's nothing to him as far as he hasn't done anything to this point for me to say, oh, he's going to cut into CMC's touches. Guerendo would be a guy that I would consider that, because we got to see a glimpse of what he looks like with a decent amount of volume, and he's capable of putting up big numbers. But I'm not worried about that if CMC is healthy, because the way I look at it is, as if CMC is healthy and he's on the field, there is no timeshare or anything like that. Shanahan just gives him the rock. So when he finally came back last year, it was the CMC show, and that was it. Like, there wasn't like, let's ease him in, that type of thing. So I'm not worried about that part. I'm just worried about him just being, the Achilles coming back and the tendonitis and everything. That's what I'm worried about.
Now let's take this question a different way. If you are drafting in one league or 2 leagues, maybe you're only drafting in your big home league, maybe you have maybe 2 big home leagues and that's it, and those are what's most important to you, and you're sitting there at like the 108, 109, and you're on the clock and Christian McCaffrey is available to you, if it was a single bullet drafter, who would be your pick sort of in that range? Or would you still lean into Christian McCaffrey and say sort of the upside wins championships? I'm chasing the highest outcome with my only league.
In a home league type setting, confined league, I look at it as like my first round pick. I just want it to be safe. I don't want to have a landmine. So I'm probably going to gravitate to one of the receivers that I think are super safe. I think, Achane is a good option if you're worried about CMC, but Achane has his own, worries. Everyone's injury prone in the NFL at the end of the day is how I look at it. Some guys maybe a little bit more than most, but I wouldn't blame anyone for taking CMC, but I think like a safer pick would be like a Monra. I think like a receiver like that, people are kind of disrespecting him a little bit, I think, this year based on where he's going in drafts. And I think he's like a lock for like 100 receptions. They give him red zone targets. So like his touchdowns are, his opportunities are always there for touchdowns. So like that would be like the type of like safe pick that I would take. I don't need to like go, boom or bust in like a confined league.
So I just dropped my top 100 PPR rankings with write-ups on every player over at Fantasy Points. You can read that for free. If you want to subscribe to Fantasy Points, use the code Theo2025. Get yourself something off for the season. But Nelson, I ranked Saquon Barkley at 5. And I had him as my RB3 behind Bijan and Jahmyr Gibbs. With Saquon, it's sort of when you say the name Saquon Barkley to fantasy managers or analysts these days, there's some very strong takes on him. He was unbelievable last year, had 2,000 rushing yards, but there's been sort of a slow drip of people talking about the 482 touches he had last year. It was the 10th most in NFL history. The last two running backs that we can look at that had this sort of workload were Arian Foster and who was the other one? It was Eddie George. It was trying to go back to the most recent. It was definitely Arian Foster. And I'm going to double check this one.
Priest Holmes.
Yep. Yeah. So there you go. Eddie George is definitely, I think, the most recent. Yeah. Eddie George was in the year 2000. So yeah, Priest Holmes was definitely a higher volume guy as well. So we go Eddie George. Oh, so it was Larry Johnson's the one I'm forgetting. So Larry Johnson, 2006, and Arian Foster in 2012 were the two most recent mega high volume players. Like we're talking about 465 touches, including the playoffs. And both of those guys saw regression the following season. And what's interesting is both of those players had big rebound seasons the year after that. So have the huge volume, regress, and then bounce back. Saquon Barkley, when you say anything sort of negative about a potential outcome with Saquon Barkley, people kind of get furious. They'll say, you're not factoring in the elite offensive line. You're not factoring in the elite rushing upside of Jalen Hurts. This offensive ecosystem for Barkley's unlike, it's one of the best in the league. Just treat him as it is. If I get him at 5 or 6, I'm not worried about it at all. So again, I have him ranked 5, but I can see the downside case. Where have you been at with your exposure to Saquon? Where are you mixing him in? Where are you comfortable drafting him at?
Yeah, he's a guy that I'm going to proceed with caution just because historically, right, those touches make a difference on a guy. I also believe in like it was a little bit of an outlier season in terms of like if you told me Jalen Hurts was going to have 14 rushing touchdowns, I would have told you that I probably don't want anything to do with Saquon, that there's just not enough meat on the bone. And he's not going to really get many touchdowns. They're going to do the tush push again. But that happened, and Saquon had double-digit touchdowns. So I don't know if that happens where he's going to score from that far out as often. You could say like his receptions could go up a little bit, but like in that offense, like that's a little bit capped. So like that was a little bit as a red flag for me that he only caught 33. And it's not because I don't think he can catch the ball. I think he's a very good pass catcher out of the backfield, but he only caught 33. So like I'm not going to be like all in on him, but at the right price, because he'll fall in a few drafts here and there. At the right price, I'll get some exposure to him in case like he's just that dude that's just different and he can handle, back-to-back years of like big volume.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you look at an NFFC ADP, and they have that for free over NFFC's website, and just specifically looking at the $350 entry RotoWire online championship drafts, you see Saquon with a minimum of 1, meaning somebody in August has taken him with the 101, and then you see a maximum of 10, which is a really kind of a wide gap for a player. So he's got a 10 spot gap, a 10 spot swing. So when you say like he'll fall, like some people say, not in my league, bro, he's not falling in my league, but he does fall in a lot of these FFPC, NFFC leagues where he gets into like that range where it's like 8, 9, 10. To me, that's a huge edge. It just becomes more of an opportunity cost thing for me when I have to take him at 4, where he's surrounded by guys like Gibbs and Robinson, who are 23 years old, less tread on the tires, not coming off of that level of volume. And then CeeDee Lamb, who I have as my wide receiver too. So for me, Saquon, I'm in on, but I'm in on like without reaching. I think it's a good way of kind of describing it.
Yeah, I agree. Cool. That's where I'm at.
So I gave a little preface to this. So if you don't know who Nelson is, Nelson, I podcasted with a ton over the years. We also split the New York Super, which is a big, really, really competitive league that we do in the NFFC. It's a live draft in New York. It's a $2,500 entry. It's big stakes. It's a closed 12-team league. Some of the best high-stakes managers in the country also compete in that. Chris Vaccaro, Billy Wazowski. It's just a murderer's row of drafters. And then, Nelson, you're going to participate in a ton of these 350s. You do a ton of the prime times, very high volume. Nelson has done extremely well over the years, not only in NFFC, but also in FFPC, has immense success in high-stakes fantasy, one of the most respected high-stakes managers in the country. You're also producing content for FTN, and that's where the fades list comes in. Let everybody know sort of what the fades list is and the content you're dropping over at FTN.
All right, so just quickly, I don't want to bore everyone with the
autobiography.
Whole,
you can do the
whole origin story, but like just kind of quickly. So I started playing fantasy. I quickly realized that I needed to be able to fade the landmines and avoid those early round picks that became busts and things like that. Injuries, that happens. It is what it is. You can't really control that. So what ended up happening was I started setting like the groundwork for like having a set of rules for my fade list. And I have that for like certain players, certain positions, things like that. And I guess it's, once I got into the content side of things and started, promoting my work, it has become popular over the years because my hit rate on the guys that I'm fading has been, better than not. And it's usually high profile players that are going in like the first few rounds, because I look at it as like, why am I going to list to someone, fade this guy in the 12th round? Like who cares? That guy is not breaking your fantasy season because, you lost your 12th round pick. So to me, it's like, the first 5-6 rounds, like that's what matters. That's what hurts if your guy busts.
Yeah, I like that. And you've taken some like really big swings on your fade list over the years. It's definitely not for the faint of heart. A lot of times, Nelson, you drop this in like the fade list comes out at like July 1st ish every year.
Like mid-July.
Yeah, like mid-July. So a bunch of drafts have already gone by, and then you log in and you see Nelson's fade list, and it's like, oh my God, I drafted a couple of these guys. So you don't want to really go head to head. The fade list, you can't bat 1,000, but over the years you've had some massive hits on guys you've faded that the market liked, and then it ended up working out in your favor. So definitely check it out. Check out all of his work, and a big shout out to the Fantasy Empire. Really, really high level, high stakes fantasy discussion. That's with Dan Williamson, who I also split some teams with, Matt Modica and Chris Vaccaro. Chris, Matt, Dan, also excellent high stakes players. That shows a really, really strong listen. Check that out wherever you get your pods. So definitely recommend Nelson's work. Now let's keep it going. See, you talked about CMC, Saquon. One wide receiver that I think we're a little bit out of line with, where one player where I think I'm a little bit higher on than you are, but it's Jaxon Smith-Njigba. Sort of your vibes with JSN, your comfort level with him, where he's going ADP-wise.
I think third round is rich. So that's the other thing too, is like when I fade guys, I'm really not biased in the fade because JSN was one of my highest owned players last year. And he came through, like he was really good. I just think that when you change the OC and you talk about you want to go run heavy, you didn't like the philosophy with Grubb and being so pass heavy, you get rid of DK, which people can see as a plus. I look at it as a negative because DK was on the outside. He kept defenses a little bit honest with the corners and everything, not having to really bunch up the middle of the field for JSN. You replace him with Cooper Kupp, who I don't like. To me, like at this stage of his career, I'm not looking at him as like, oh, that's the reason why, JSN, could be a bust. But it's just the fact that Cooper Kupp is better suited to be in the slot these days and not play outside. And if he does play outside and JSN stays kind of like in his slot role that he had last year, I don't think defenses really are going to respect that. And I think you can kind of shrink the middle of the field for JSN a little bit, because that would be the guy that I'd be trying to stop. So there's that. The offensive line is not that great, and I think they got a downgrade at quarterback. Say what you want, like Geno maybe is not a great fantasy quarterback, but I think he's a good NFL quarterback. And I don't think Sam Darnold's that good. Like he had a great year, and I think it was because of the system. But he got exposed at the end of the year, and that's what I keep going back to is what did he look like when the lights were the brightest and his offensive line couldn't protect him. So that worries me a little bit too for JSN, because I could see this as just being like this like run heavy team trying to win games, and JSN is not really like necessarily a priority. So that's my case for why you should avoid JSN in the third round. Theo, you're going to tell us why we're going to take him. Go ahead.
Well, I'll go a little devil's advocate with you, and I'll just say, so and one other thing that I think it's appreciated about the way you draft and the fade list is when Nelson says he's fading a player, he's fading them at ADP. And I think that's one of the things where you get these fantasy managers who maybe are angry about the way something went in years before. Maybe they were burned on a player in years past. There a lot of times your fade list will include a player where in a draft, if he falls, your valuation changes a little bit about him. So if JSN was a 4th round pick, would you be clicking the button way more often, or would you still have the same sort of reservations?
I think, 4th round, it's not a huge difference, but it's still a difference. And I think that at that point, it's a little more reasonable, because where he's going around in the 3rd round, there's Lamar Jackson, there's Trey McBride in non-premium drafts, not non-tight end premium drafts. And there's other receivers that I like, more than JSN, like, T Higgins. I rather have T Higgins. I think T Higgins' ceiling is bigger than JSN. So yeah, it's ADP factors in and who's around him when he's on the board.
I think that's a great argument for it. And I know we talked in the pre-show sort of positively about T Higgins and sort of he's just a guy that doesn't have a whole lot of buzz right now with fantasy managers. He just goes where he is. A lot of people take him structurally. I agree with you. I think T Higgins is a really, really, really fun click. My argument with JSN would be, even though the DK was there last year, JSN catches 100 passes, but he had this 9.2 ADOT. I think he's going to get some more opportunities to make plays downfield. And then Kupp has to play in the slot a lot. I agree, but I don't think JSN slot usage is going to disappear. I still think they'll manufacture a lot of plays for him in the slot. I think Kupp can play on the outside as a blocker. In this Kubiak offense, they ask the wide receivers to block. So I think JSN has that. And what's interesting with JSN is everyone would assume that the target share was massive because he's got this, this slot reputation, catches 100 balls, but the target share has room to run as well. So I think this year we see a little bit higher ADOT. We see the target share go way up. I think the first read rate goes up, and there's just some positive vibes with him. So I think I'm just a little more comfortable taking him in that range. I understand your reservations about the offensive line play, and I agree with you that I think this Kubiak scheme was put in for them to be better at running the ball, but it's a low bar for that. They were bottom 5 in rushing yards last year. So I like your argument with the Trey McBride. I think he's a really safe pick in this range. Lamar is obviously a really safe pick in this range. And those one-off positions might be the safest way to kind of navigate the third round right now, especially with NFFC ADP. So I will admit you have some very good takes on that with JSN. We'll bump heads a little bit on this one. I'm sure we'll touch base through 8 games this year.
No, I have no problem. I don't take it personal. I actually appreciate the pushback. As long as it's not disrespectful pushback. But I enjoy arguing and making, rebuttals back and forth. But I will say this, when you look back at drafts, even last year and then the year before, and you look at a draft board, just ADP wise, right? It's littered with landmines, right? The third round, just a bunch of guys that just didn't hit, right? They just busted. And that's going to be true again this year. But there's guys that I actually think, and I'm getting off subject, but the third round to me is the hardest round for me personally to navigate. And I think there's just a lot of guys there that have potential and have a lot of question marks. And the guys that I think are almost bust proof outside of an injury is guys like Lamar, Josh Allen, and then Trey McBride. I don't see I don't see a path where he busts if he's healthy. So there's just safer options, and I think there's something to be said about just clicking on one of those elite quarterbacks, getting exposure to those type of guys, and then figuring out your receiver or your running back in the 4th, 5th round, as opposed to you take these guys and then things don't work out really.
I remember having this conversation with Chris Vaccaro a few years ago, and a shout out to Chris, again, one of the better high stakes managers anywhere, has a number of overall finishes to his name. But we talked about it at the time where it was the return of early QB, and early QB was sort of became kind of fashionable. Now we're back to early QB being in a range where, okay, I get it. It's Lamar Jackson at the 2-3 turn. It's Josh Allen at the 2-3 turn in NFFC. It's Lamar Jackson at the 3-4 turn in FFPC. Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jaden Daniels, all are in a range where it doesn't feel gross having to take them there. It actually feels like it's an edge pick. And I think the take was the same as yours. It's landmine ridden where you sometimes see the running back sort of failing to deliver. Sometimes it's that wide receiver that the market pushes up way too high. Like you said, you can go back every single year and find like a third round wide receiver who really, really didn't deliver. The quarterbacks, unless they get hurt, when they're that elite level and they have that rushing ability and they're in elite offenses, they're really safe picks. And safe picks sometimes gets people like rolling their eyes. They're like, I don't want to think safe. I want to swing for the fence on every pick. But I think that's sort of the nature of the fades list. Do you kind of agree that mixing in elite quarterback is a viable strategy this year, Nelson?
I do, because once we get into the season, right, and let's say head to head, you've got your match and you're up by like 22 points and you're feeling pretty good, and then you go and look at your opponent and he's got Lamar Jackson left on Monday night. You're like, all right, chalk it up. It's a loss, most likely, right? But if like you go and look and he's got, Kyler Murray on Monday night, you're like, there's a chance. Like I feel pretty good. I'm in the game. So there's something to be said of like those elite quarterbacks. They're difference makers and they're an edge. In the third round, I don't think it's this like high price to pay for those particular guys. Even Joe Burrow, their defense sucks. Okay.
Yep.
They're gonna be in shootouts. Okay. Once again. So Joe Burrow is another guy that I think is like a viable option, and he doesn't go in the third round. He goes later in drafts, but I think he should be put up there with Lamar and Josh Allen.
I'm with you with Burrow. I have Burrow like way higher in my rankings than he goes. I've made the case that I think Burrow could have that 2013 Peyton Manning like 50 touchdown pass season in 2025, 2026. I think that's like in the range of outcomes. Unbelievable skill position talent around him. I even like the Noah Fant pickup. Like they run 12 personnel a lot, and not saying Fant's going to be fantasy viable, but it's just another guy out there who's a threat. Yoshivas, Jermaine Burton has better vibes than last year. Chase Brown is going to have a really strong season, and Jamar Chase is the best player in fantasy, and not even talking about T. Higgins. So I'm with you. The Burrow is a really strong pick this year, no question about it. I'm very into him.
Yep.
One quarterback that's interesting, Nelson. So like quarterback's one of the easiest to predict where they're going in your league. Once you get through the top six, it goes the big three quarterbacks. Then you see Burrow and Hurts. So the big five, essentially. Then Patrick Mahomes sort of exists in his own little tier. Someone's going to reach for him. Sometimes he falls, but he's sort of always that quarterback. Then you get to QB7 on. And QB7 on, people have their favorites, their flag planting guys. But usually one of the first quarterbacks selected from QB7 on is Baker Mayfield. Baker's had some tremendous moments in Tampa, has some very good pass catchers around him, had a ton of touchdown passes last year. I believe it was 41 was his final total. He's a player that maybe you're not as into this year.
He's not. And again, it's part of it is ADP because of where he goes. So I feel like once you get past Hurts, there's like a little drop, and then there's Mahomes. And then there's possibly like another round, and then Baker goes off the board. And I feel like I'll take Baker when he drops in drafts, but I'm not like actively targeting him. And I also don't like love the vibes this year. You're changing OC. It could be a nothing burger, or it could be an issue, and the offense kind of sputters a little bit without Liam Cohen. And as far as the vibes that I'm talking about is this. Mike Evans, hamstring injury. That's just a reminder to people that he's up there in age, I believe 32 years old, entering the season, history of hamstring injuries. Like I could see where he misses time. Chris Godwin, right? Had all off season to heal up. Sounds like he had a second procedure. What does that look like? Is he going to be ready for the season? I don't necessarily like love the vibe. So it's a guy that I'm not really actively targeting. And I will say this, I love Ibuka, and I'm all in on Ibuka. And I think McMillan is also a very talented receiver. So people could point to, well, if Evans Godwin misses time, we got Ibuka who's like in the Hall of Fame already, right? And
he's definitely a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, he's a Hall of Famer. And and then McMillan, right? So the offense doesn't skip a beat. I look at it as kind of this. Yes, I'm in on Ibuka because if Evans or Godwin misses time, I think he could be like a PPR monster. But I could also see where if Evans Godwin misses time, Baker disappoints. And I think both can be true.
Yeah, it's a very interesting take. Baker had some rushing production last year. I just think with Baker, I like Baker a lot. I think more than you do, but it's a opportunity cost thing where if I have to take him at the QB7, not so into it. But there has been drafts where that entire tier of QBs just drops, and I see it a little bit more in FFPC than NFFC. And anybody listening says, why does the ADP bounce around? The basic reason is with quarterbacks, NFFC is 6-point passing touchdown, FFPC is 4-point passing touchdown, NFFC is start 3 wide receivers, FFPC you start 2 of them, 2 flexes FFPC, 1 flex NFFC, and then the big difference is the 1.5 point tight end premium scoring for the tight end position in FFPC. So the ADPs don't match up completely. They're similar on some positions though. But I'll say with Baker, I've mixed him in when he falls. And I do think, Nelson, as we get more and more along the lines of this month, you're going to see way more variance between like QB7 and QB12, because I think people are going to start forming their stacks. They're going to start taking their guys. And also you're not the only smart person who's been bringing up Baker Mayfield. Like JJ Zachariason has talked about him as a big touchdown regression guy. Just the touchdown rate sort of unsustainable. So there's a lot of people sort of on this train with Baker question marks. Also the Tristan Wirfs stuff, where when does Tristan Wirfs return? One of the best offensive linemen in football, certainly the best on Tampa Bay. So he's a very interesting one. Let's start out with a fun one that gets people going. Minnesota, you've got Aaron Jones, who was very good last year, his first year as a Viking. And then you've got Jordan Mason, who's been really, really steaming up since the summer began. They have a very converging ADP. They usually go close to one another, whether it's underdog, FFPC, NFFC. We like the offensive line in Minnesota. We think they're going to score some points this year. Which running back are you betting on in this backfield?
Well, here's the thing. Aaron Jones is a little bit older. He doesn't fit my profile of running back that I like to take, unless he's like a big discount. But at the same time, I think Jordan Mason is starting to go a little too high, because I think he's just basically like more touchdown dependent. He's going to get some carries, but Aaron Jones is like, he's not going away. Like, he's not taking Aaron Jones's job outside of injury. So it's kind of interesting where I was basically like fading Aaron Jones, and now I'm at the point where I'm like, well, you know what? Aaron Jones is going a little too late, and Mason's going a little too early. So I'm on the fence with that one, to be honest, because I could see where they want to go a little bit more, run the ball a little more than they did last year. They got McCarthy. That's an interesting dynamic with that offense and what that offense looks like, because McCarthy's very different profile than Darnold and Kirk Cousins there. And it makes me wonder, and I'm not meaning this to be a hot take, but it just makes me wonder about like Jefferson and what the ceiling is with Jefferson this year in particular. because I think he's, one of the top receivers in football. But I don't know. I feel like they're going to run the ball more. McCarthy, what I don't know. He liked the tight end in college. He runs himself. So I don't know. I know we're talking about the backfield, and I kind of got off subject, but I think it's one of those interesting offenses this year that I really don't know what their identity necessarily is going to be. But to answer your question, I think I'm like not really on either guy unless they fall a little bit in a draft, and then I'll take them.
I had them ranked back to back in my top 100, and I think that they're both going in a range where it's worth getting exposure to, because if McCarthy struggles, I think it's almost a benefit to Mason because they're going to have to run the ball a little bit more. If it's a more of a free-flowing offense, I think that you'll see a lot more Aaron Jones. The one, even the most bullish Jordan Mason drafter, I know we're friends with a couple of guys who have a ton of exposure to Jordan Mason. Even with the Jordan Mason enthusiasm, the Jordan Addison suspension, where he's going to miss the first 3 games of the season, sort of makes Aaron Jones as a receiver out of the backfield a little bit more of a story you can tell yourself, where Hawkinson, Aaron Jones, one of those 2 guys, I think will see a little bit more target share than they would have if Addison was on the field. I think it's going to consolidate a little bit. So I agree with you. And I think with Jefferson, he's never a guy that it's, I would fade, but I have him ranked like 6 overall in my PPR rankings, right there with Malik Neighbors. But like you said, if the offense sputters a little bit, it's one of those years where there's just so much appealing wide receiver talent behind him that Jefferson could average 17, 18 points per game, but you might be missing out on a wide receiver who averaged 20 points per game, a couple picks behind him if it sort of works out well. So a lot of pressure on McCarthy to kind of get this thing going.
Yeah, see, my worry with Jefferson, it's not even like the hamstring injury, because I think it's probably minor enough and he's got plenty of time to get fully healthy before the season. My issue is that he's missing valuable reps with McCarthy. Right. So like it's a new quarterback for him. So in order to get like that chemistry and build on it, I think it could start off, a little rough, could be a little rocky.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting one. And it's a tilting one because, passing on Justin Jefferson, it just feels weird to pass on him. It's sort of a mid first round type value, but I've done it. I've had a couple of FFPC drafts where I've gone the other way. I still want to pack in some exposure to Jefferson. We'll keep an eye on that hamstring throughout the rest of the month as well. Quickly, the Dallas backfield. Is Javonte Williams a guy that you feel a certain confidence level, or is it just a player that's being, hey, the situation's good, I'm going to mix in a little because he's the most likely candidate to kind of lead the backfield if we're going to believe all the beat reporters and all the camp reports?
Yeah, we talked about this before the show started, right? We started going down this road, is the fact that I think with running back, unlike the wide receiver position, you don't necessarily need to have a ton of talent. It's more about the opportunity. And to sustain that, it's running backs with vision. They know how to hit the hole. They know which hole to hit. Those factors matter more than just having like superstar talent. And with Javonte, I'm not a big fan of his, but at the end of the day, someone's has to carry the ball in Dallas. Someone's got to get goal line touches, and someone's going to catch a few passes out of the backfield. And I think he's best suited for that. Jaden Blue is a guy that I don't see, like, based on his build and everything, I don't see him as like a guy that's going to get like a ton of run. I could see him mixing in 100% because he's a different style than Javonte. I think Sanders is kind of, I don't know. I think he's past his prime.
Yeah.
He's whatever. Javante's the guy that, he had some unfortunate, an injury, ACL. So that's kind of like derailed that train from when his rookie year, he looked really good. So yeah, I could see it where, he's healthy. He's the best option there in that backfield. I could also see where Dallas, if he's not impressing, I could see where Dallas makes a move at some point before the season. And it could be something like minor, but it could be a running back that's just better than Javonte that comes in. But right now, as of today, yeah, I'm drafting Javonte just on the simple fact that I think he's the guy that's going to get the volume.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that resonates with me with Javonte is if he's going to get the targets out of the backfield, then I think he'll deliver enough. It's a capped upside bet. I think it's more of a structural pick where if I need to get something out of the running back 2 position early on in the year, and that's sort of the way my team is built, I wouldn't view Javonte as a guy that I'd want to like cram into flexes, that sort of player. I think it's more of a structural pick, but I get it. I sort of have taken the pro Jaden Blue stance all off season long because it's enticing where you have 2 running backs who don't have any speed, and you've got Jaden Blue runs a 4.33 flat. Jaden Blue can catch the football, but it just, we don't have the buzz. Jaden Blue's been a little banged up recently. We just don't have the vibes that he's going to make that early season impact. So I get it. If you're drafting a hero RB team, you need RB2. Drafting a 0 RB team, you're trying to play catch up with guys that are going to get weekly touches. Javonte certainly is the best bet for the first month of the season. I do worry. I agree with you completely. Maybe Dallas makes a move for a Travis Etienne. There's some rumblings out there that would certainly give us something to talk about, be a fun little twist for our last couple weeks of drafts too. Let's keep it going with a backfield that's very interesting. And this is one where people have very strong takes. It's the Pittsburgh Steelers backfield, where you've got Caleb Johnson, mega productive player at Iowa, a 3rd-round pick this year. And then you've got Jalen Warren, who's had some strong years under Mike Tomlin, made the team as an undrafted free agent years ago. He was a Mike Tomlin favorite. He sort of really had a huge impact on Najee Harris, where Harris was a big-time pass catcher as a rookie, and then his numbers came cratering down because of the presence of Warren. Warren has a year where he had over 1,000 combined yards. He had a couple of productive games to end last season. This is one that's giving drafters major headaches, and I think there's some strong takes in either direction. Should drafters be investing in Jalen Warren, and he goes sort of in the 90s range in NFFC drafts, or Caleb Johnson, who goes somewhere in the early, like the high 70s, like low 60s, high 70s?
Yeah, I'm off of Caleb. Jalen Warren would be my pick because I think he's going to handle all the passing down work. And the way I look at it is, we've seen now practice reports. We saw it in the preseason. He just does not look very smooth catching the football, that Caleb Johnson. And I think Jalen Warren is very good at catching the football. And I also think that, like, you have Aaron Rodgers behind center, old Aaron Rodgers, grumpy. And I could see where, like, a scenario where he's like, listen, I can't have this kid out here, like, missing, pass protection assignments. I'm trying to, I'm getting, bull rushed, and I need to be able to dump it off quick. I need a guy that has sticky hands and can get up the field. And Caleb just looks like it takes him a little while to get moving. So that's why I think Jalen Warren is going to get a bigger piece of the pie than most people think. And then the other thing too is, when I'm underweight on a player or fading a player, I always ask myself the question of, this guy that I'm going to have low ownership on, can he break fantasy? And I don't see it with Caleb Johnson, because if something happened to Jalen Warren, I actually think Kenneth Gainwell would come right in and play all the passing down work. So I don't see a ceiling with Caleb Johnson. That's why I think at his price, I much rather wait a couple of more rounds and then take Warren.
And really, this is sort of more of a dynasty discussion, but it certainly applies to redraft. We talked about it in the pre-show, and it's something that we'll monitor this year. If Caleb Johnson fails to deliver, we've seen a number of these third-round pick running backs really, really fail to take off, at least initially in their career. Last year, we saw Blake Corum, Trey Benson. Neither one of them paid off. Certainly were those cost drafters a lot. There was drafts last year. I was in some of those NFFC drafts with you where we saw people really reaching to get Corum, reaching to get Benson, ensure that they get those guys a little bit ahead of ADP. Years before, Kendre Miller really failed to deliver. So the third round, with all due respect to our guy Devon Achane, there's been a lot of misses in this round. So if this does come into fruition, two takeaways here. If Johnson doesn't deliver this year, it means Jaylen Warren is going to be a really, really strong pick because he can catch passes out of the backfield. And this is a team where there's not enough mouths to feed that we are not going to see a little bit of running back production there. And Arthur Smith, to his credit, has had a number of seasons where he's produced with a lot of different kinds of running backs. Tyler Algier, Cordero Patterson, and then, obviously the Derrick Henry, Bijan Robinson, the guy down the street from you could produce with those guys. But Cordero, Tyler Algier, those guys were really productive under Smith. So we'll keep an eye on that one. Very quickly, in or out on Breece Hall and Braylon Allen. This is not an ambiguous backfield. Hall goes rounds and rounds and rounds ahead of him. But we're starting to have a little bit of clarity about how things are shaping up in New York. Breece Hall's a litmus test guy. I think a lot of drafters look at him and they say, Breece Hall's never averaged fewer than 15 points per game. He can catch passes, and New York doesn't have anybody. He's got to be a value to me at the end of the third, early fourth. There's some who look at him and say, maybe this isn't Aaron Glenn's guy. Now you got Braylon Allen, who's steaming up. You're starting to see him routinely selected inside of the 10th round, occasionally going a little higher. By the time we get to Vegas, I could see more 9th round Braylon Allen sort of being the norm. How are you handling this Jets backfield? Do you have interest in it?
Yeah, so early on in camp, we had chatter with Aaron Glenn and the coaches talking about, we love this running back room. It's going to be a committee. We're going to, Allen's going to get touches. Isaiah Davis we like. But like Breece is our pass catching guy. All those things that, coaches are going to talk highly of their players, right? They're not going to shit on their players. But first preseason game, Aaron Glenn could be trolling us, but that was ugly. That was a committee and basically what he had told us. So going off of that, this offense, like, even if it's just Allen and Breece and not Isaiah Davis, and people looking at it as like, coming from Detroit, it's going to be very similar. The Jets offense is not the Lions offense. So to me, I don't necessarily want a part of, the most expensive guy in this committee, even if it's Breece, catching passes. So I need to see Breece needs to fall further down the draft for me to be interested in him. Right now, at the end of the third round, I'm not really interested in Breece. And it's just off of, like I said, Glenn could be trolling me and I could fall, I'm falling for it. I'm a sucker. But I think right now he's a man of his word. Like, that's just going to be one of those situations where Allen's going to get enough touches that I don't see where Breece, pays off that price in that offense. So that's my opinion on it.
And then are you mixing in some Braylon Allen structurally?
Yeah. I'm definitely mixing in Braylon Allen. He's not like, it's interesting because I think he is one of the good handcuff running backs types, and he tends to go he goes later than give you an example, like Trey Benson, right? That would be like a handcuff type. Ray Davis is another guy. There's a few of them, and Allen seems to go just below those guys. So yeah, I'm naturally interested in Allen at his price.
Yeah, no, I'm a big Braylon Allen. I moved him inside of my top 100, so I've been like sort of banging the drum for that. I get it with Breece Hall. It's scary. I think that the way he gets us, or the way he gets people that are not overloading, is if he catches a lot of passes. But I think that there's a chance that goal line goes to Braylon Allen no matter what. And you talk about the offense, this offense could sputter. There's going to be improved offensive line play. Justin Fields, very mobile. But again, year one for this system and not a lot of skill position talent. New York could sputter. And if they sputter, you're talking about a player that we want to catch a lot of passes out of the backfield, not getting a whole lot of touchdown opportunities. Breece Hall's never rushed for 1,000 yards in any season in his career. So really, really polarizing player right now at ADP. All right, so Nelson, we'll go lightning round on this one. Really generous with your time. This show's been awesome. But a couple of years back, Nelson, we did this show, and I said, what rookie do you like this year? Who you been drafting a lot of rookie-wise? And it was an interesting take at the time. It was Amon-Ra St. Brown. And you made this case for drafting Amon-Ra St. Brown and just sticking him on your bench, and he's going to get an opportunity based on the wide receivers around him in Detroit, and you liked his talent profile coming out of USC. And then Amon-Ra St. Brown was like a league winner down the stretch. Then the two of us, a couple years back, drafted Puka Nacua in the New York Super. He broke NFFC waiver wires. People were bidding like $900 for him. We drafted him. So like you've had some really good hits rookie wise. No one thinks of you as like some dynasty guy, but you've had a bunch of rookie hits. Give me a rookie or two that have been part of your draft strategy this season.
Yeah. So here's the thing. What's unique about those guys, those are a few years apart, right, Theo? So
Yep.
At the end of the day, like sometimes we're trying to chase that same hit that we made, and it's just nowhere to be found. So Amon-Ra, I just had a lot of conviction on that. Puka, I had a lot of conviction on that pick. And I would say like this year, I don't necessarily, have that late round, the vibe on that late round wide receiver that I have a strong conviction on that I think is going to hit.
Well, how about give me like go high profile?
It would be an earlier.
Yeah, go earlier. Yeah, go for it. Yeah, and I was just giving you a little props on that one. So I'll say
I appreciate it.
Since the Amon-Ra St. Brown situation happened, like the whole rookie wide receivers being cheat code was something drafters kind of knew about. Now the market's moved with it. You're paying higher premiums. That being said, you've also had 4 out of the last 5 years where we've had at least one top 6 scorer in PPR that was a rookie. This year, people wanted to kind of fade that. But for me, I think Tet McMillan is going to be a smash pick. I love taking him in drafts. There's a bunch of running backs. So we'll take Genty out of the mix here. Take away the highest drafted one. When you take Genty out of it, who's a player that you think could be really good that you have some exposure to?
There's two guys at running back, Trevion Henderson and RJ Harvey.
Love it.
And they're both going to be in committees. So I'm not going to lie to myself and say, love the talent profile. They're too good. Dobbins and Stevenson suck. At the end of the day, like it doesn't matter like what I think and how highly I think of the rookie. It's just the fact of the matter is that those coaches are going to involve those veteran guys. Okay. And they're just not going to go away. Now, the upside where they get unlocked, Henderson and Harvey, is if Stevenson puts the ball on the ground, and that's been kind of an issue for him throughout his career. I could see where Henderson like starts getting a bigger piece of the pie, and in the second half, that train is just rolling, and he's a difference maker. With Harvey,
not to interrupt you, Henderson feels like a 2026 top 20 pick in every draft. He'll be top 20 pick in like NFFC, FFPC heading into his second year, and that momentum will be established in the second half of the year. So I totally love that take, Nelson.
Yeah, and here's the thing too. I actually think he has a floor because I do think that he's the passing down specialist in McDaniel's offense. And that counts for something. So like people are going to be disappointed where Henderson is going if that's all he is and Stevenson doesn't go away. But I also think like that's still going to be like he's still going to be solid, like not what you were expecting out of the pick, but still solid. And then with Harvey, Dobbins has never had a healthy season, in his career, and I've always liked Dobbins' talent, and he's gone through through some rough times with his injuries. If something happens to Dobbins, like Harvey, when I watched him in that preseason game, and I know it's a small sample, but some guys, like for me, the way I look at it is when I'm watching football, some guys have that it factor, and then some guys are like, okay, to me, he's scary if you are underweight on that guy because of the offense that he's in and his talent profile. And, the offensive line is tremendous. Peyton, I could see Harvey breaking fantasy if like Dobbins went away. And so like those are two really high upside type of rookie running backs that I like. And then obviously I like the Tet McMillan one. And then this one he's not a sleeper like Amon-Ra and Puka were, their rookie years. But like the guy that stands out to me is Ibuka. Is the guy. Like he's up there. He's getting steamed up in drafts. But like he's the guy that also that I think could like be really good this year. And where he's going, even though it looks kind of pricey, I think he could even outdo that price pretty easily.
Yeah, it's funny. Ibuka is one where I ranked him 66th in my top 100, thinking that anybody who's reading this that has like a Yahoo, a sleeper, an ESPN draft, and that was following my rankings would get him. That you take him a little bit ahead, you get him a little bit ahead of ADP, but the way that this like train is moving with Ibuka, that might be where he's going by the end of the month in every single league. Like you're already seeing it where people are reaching for him in FFPC, NFFC, and then Underdog, just forget about it. Like Underdog in best ball, Ibuka's been steamed up so high, but I think it's worth it. And a lot of times people don't factor in when you get these young players who take over a wide receiver room, it's just so rapid. And one player I got to get you to share your opinion on, because I know you've been very expressive about him on podcasts and also on X, Ricky Pearsall. This is a player that I think also could have a big breakout this year. You've been sort of pounding the table that this is the wide receiver you need in San Francisco. It's very clear to you. Make the bull case for a big year out of Pearsall.
Yeah, just the talent profile for him. I think he's the best receiver they have. Ayuk's going to miss. It's now been kind of set in stone with Shanahan that week 6 is what we're looking at with Ayuk. So obviously his progression from his injury has been really slow. Jawan Jennings doesn't move the needle for me. Like I don't like his ADP at all. To me, he's just kind of just a guy, and he kind of fits that mold of like journeyman receiver, like in his 5th year breakout. I just don't believe in that. He was a waiver wire guy that helped a lot of teams last year, and he was a big part of their success. And now people are trying to draft him that high, and I just think that Pearsall is the guy that like you want in that offense. He's the guy that you're going to be able to take like shots downfield with him, pretty explosive. And, outside of Kittle and CMC, like they just don't have, anybody else. So like, I think he's going to get the targets this year. Like I could see that breakout coming.
Yeah. And also he's got that extreme athletic ability. So if you want to emulate some of the Debo stuff around the line of scrimmage, Pearsall can do that as well. And it sounds like Brandon Ayuk week 6 is what Kyle Shanahan's saying. So like, Ayuk, who knows? And that's always been a guy that sort of, depending on the way the wind is blowing, might not be getting along with Shanahan. I think Ricky Pearsall has a chance to get off to a really fast start. Demarcus Robinson might miss time with an injury. You've got like all these guys just banged up, and Pearsall healthy. All the reports are strong. Nelson, this one was awesome.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'll tell you one guy that could be sneaky later in the season. He's more of like a waiver wire guy. Is Jordan Watkins. He
Yep.
flashed me, and I could see like later in the season where we're talking about picking up Jordan Watkins. He suffered a high ankle sprain, so he's going to be out a while. So, we got to wait on that. But he's a guy definitely that flash for me that I could see being something before the season ends.
Yeah, that was one where I remember during the draft process where Brett Whitefield was not a Trey Harris guy. Brett's our resident ball knower at Fantasy Points, like evaluates all these guys, does the draft guide. And Brett was never high on Trey Harris. Like I was higher on Trey Harris than he was. And pretty much everybody was higher on Trey Harris than he was. He adjusted a little bit after the landing spot to LA. But what's interesting was he said Jordan Watkins and Trey Harris were very similar prospects for him. Didn't see a whole lot of difference as prospects. And then you get these reports out of San Francisco that Watkins has just been tearing it up. Has this pathway to being like the number 3 wide receiver there. So big shout out to Brett. He's constantly getting things right. And big shout out to Nelson for your time and your takes. Let me know once again where they can find your work.
FTN Fantasy. I've got the high stakes package, which gives you access to my rankings, my cheat sheet, fade list, a bunch of articles that I wrote on my breakout running backs, and also my targets per round. So it lists the guys that I'm targeting. I'm the type of drafter where I have more of a condensed draft sheet with guys. I eliminate guys off of my board. So I've got that available. And then the Discord channel, which gives you access to me 24/7 to ask any questions during the draft season and in season.
Yeah, check out all of Nelson's work. Check out his podcast. Check out Fantasy Empire. Check out School of Scott. Scott and I have been putting out a bunch of great episodes every single week. Dynasty Life, my Dynasty show. Mike Leone was on the most recent Fantasy Football Daily before, of course, Nelson today. Check that one out. That was a really, really good one. We talked about some sleepers and sort of the way to navigate rounds 9 on in your drafts. Going to be dropping multiple episodes a week. Make sure you subscribe to Fantasy Points YouTube channel. And if you want to subscribe to Fantasy Points, use the code Theo2025. Will help you win your league.